It did not sound abusive when they said it. That is why it worked. That is why it stayed in your head long after the conversation ended. You walked away feeling confused, not angry, not even sure what just happened. Just off. Like something shifted. Like somehow you were wrong, but you could not explain how. And that feeling kept repeating. Small moments, small phrases, nothing extreme, nothing obvious. But over time, they started changing how you see yourself, how you trust yourself, how you speak, how you think. And by the end of it, you were not just dealing with them. You were doubting your own reality. Here is what most people miss. Gaslighting does not usually start with big lies. It starts with normal-sounding sentences, things that seem harmless, even reasonable. That is what makes them dangerous. Because you do not defend yourself against something that sounds normal, you absorb it, you adjust to it, and slowly you lose your sense of clarity. By the end of this, you are going to see 5 phrases differently. You are going to hear them for what they actually are, and more importantly, you will know exactly how to respond without losing your power. The first phrase sounds almost harmless. You're overreacting. You have heard this before. Maybe during an argument. Maybe when you tried to explain how something hurt you. You were calm, you were clear, and instead of addressing what you said, they dismissed your reaction. At first, you might question yourself. Maybe I am overreacting. Maybe I made it bigger than it is. So you pull back, you soften your point. You try to be more reasonable. But here is what is actually happening. They are not addressing the behavior. They are controlling your reaction to it. Because if they can convince you that your feelings are too much, they never have to take responsibility for what caused those feelings. Over time, this trains you to minimize yourself. You stop speaking up. You start filtering your emotions. You become easier to manage. And the takeaway is simple. Your reaction is information, not a problem. The second phrase sounds even more subtle. I never said that. This one hits deeper, because now it is not about your emotions, it is about your memory. You remember clearly the tone, the words, the moment, but when they deny it so confidently, something inside you hesitates. Did I hear it wrong? Am I mixing things up? So you replay the conversation in your head. You second-guess yourself. And the more it happens, the less you trust your own perception. This is not miscommunication. This is reality distortion, because if they can rewrite the past, they control the present. And when you lose trust in your memory, you become dependent on their version of events. That is the goal. Not to win the argument, but to become the authority of what is real. The third phrase feels logical on the surface. You're too sensitive. It sounds like feedback, like something you should work on, so you take it seriously. You try to toughen up, you try not to take things personally. But notice what is missing. There is no acknowledgement of what they did, only a judgment about how you felt. This shifts the focus away from their behavior and puts it entirely on you. And now you are not asking if they crossed a line, you are asking if you are the problem. That shift is everything. Because it keeps you stuck in self-correction instead of boundary setting, and the more you try to fix your sensitivity, the more they push your limits. Because they know you will question yourself before you question them. The fourth phrase sounds like closure. You're remembering it wrong. This one is quiet, calm, almost reassuring, but it is deeply destabilizing because it does not attack your emotions directly. It attacks your confidence in your own mind. You start thinking maybe your interpretation is off. Maybe you misunderstood the situation. So you give them the benefit of the doubt again, and again, and again, until your version of events feels less valid than theirs. And this is where the damage compounds, because now you are not just confused in the moment. You are building a pattern of self-doubt. And once that pattern forms, it follows you everywhere, not just with them, with everyone. But the most dangerous part is what happens next. You start explaining yourself more. You start over-clarifying everything you say. You try to make your points perfect so they cannot be twisted. You rehearse conversations in your head before you have them. You become hyper-aware of your words. And still, it is never enough, because the issue was never your communication. It was their need for control. The fifth phrase is the one that traps people the longest. I was just joking. This one comes after something that clearly hurt. A comment, a jab, a subtle insult. And when you react, they pull back and label it as humor. Now you are in a difficult position. If you stay upset, you look like you cannot take a joke. If you let it go, they get away with it. So you laugh it off, even when it did not feel funny. And this teaches them something, that they can disrespect you as long as they hide it behind humor. And over time, those jokes get sharper, more personal, more targeted. But you have already been conditioned not to challenge them. And this is where most people make the biggest mistake. They try to argue their way out of gaslighting. They explain, they defend, they bring evidence, they try to prove what was said, what was meant, what actually happened, and every time they do that, they step deeper into the trap. Because gaslighting is not a misunderstanding, it is a strategy, and you cannot logic your way out of a strategy designed to confuse you. The more you try to prove your reality, the more they pull you into theirs, and that is where your power drains. The shift happens when you stop trying to convince them and start anchoring yourself. Instead of saying, "But you did say that," you say, "I remember it differently," and you leave it there. Instead of arguing about whether you are too sensitive, you say, "That did not feel okay to me," and you do not justify it. Instead of laughing off a disrespectful joke, you say, "That was not funny." Calm, simple, clear, no extra explanation, no emotional overexposure. Because the goal is not to win the conversation, it is to protect your clarity, and when you do this consistently, something changes. They lose the ability to pull you into confusion. They might push harder at first. They might escalate. They might try new angles. But without your engagement, the strategy weakens. And more importantly, you start trusting yourself again. You stop needing their agreement to validate your experience. You stop questioning every reaction. You stop shrinking to avoid conflict. And that is the real shift. You move from reactive to grounded, from confused to clear, from controlled to self-directed, and once you feel that difference, you cannot unsee it. Because now, when someone says those same phrases, they do not sound normal anymore. They sound like what they always were. Control disguised as conversation, and you respond differently, not louder, not more aggressive, but more certain, more contained, more aware. Because real power is not in proving someone wrong. It is in not needing them to agree with you in the first place. And when you reach that point, gaslighting stops working, not because they stopped trying, but because you stopped participating.